Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me for this, our fourth of four season previews, is my co-host Nick Martin and special guest Andy McNeil. Andy is the staff writer and the projection scientist, I'll call him, for Canada sports betting, a hockey betting expert, someone I've learned a ton from over the years betting on hockey, and we are so glad to have Andy under the Better Collective umbrella, and we're so glad to have him here. This episode's format is pretty simple. Nick, Andy, and I are going to go rapid fire through basically any market we can get our hands on before the NHL season starts. So futures markets, from Stanley Cup to player props, worst record, etc. We're going to go quickly. We're just going to try to set you guys up with a whole bunch of bets for consideration before the season starts. We're going to start, of course, with Stanley Cup futures, and I'll let you go first, Nick.
Yeah, so there's two that I'm kind of in on. I like the Oilers are still at plus 1100. I think that's probably the most popular cup outright bet out there. But I love the way that they set up with Draisaitl and McDavid this year, and the fact that some of the other top contenders really couldn't gain much around the edges. I think that worked out well for Edmonton. So everything that was there last year, they were close with Vegas. They probably gave them the best series. I think that everything that was there last year, they could grow on that. Bouchard could be better. We saw the way they turned it on the second half with him. We talked in our awards show how we're all over him. I just think everything's setting up pretty well for the Oilers outside of maybe a shakier goaltending duo than some of the true contenders, but everything's right there for the taking. It feels like McDavid and Draisaitl are primed to give this thing another good run. So I like the Oilers at plus 1100. And then I'm back in on the Hurricanes. I think last year I stayed off them, so I feel like now I get to, piss away a season on them. But they're just same kind of boat. They're so primed. Everything's there. They've been trending towards this push for getting into the final and finally a win under Brendamore for so many years. The decor is stacked. Everything looks so good on that front. They're deep. Aho's a true number one center. So special teams will be a strength as well. Two goalies that can get it done. So everything about the Canes, I think, screams true contender. And I think if you can get them at their plus 1,000 still, I think that's a good way to get a team that's going to be there at the end of the year.
Andy, you're going a step below those two.
Yeah, I am. And I have four teams ahead of the team I'm going to talk about in terms of their chances to win the Stanley Cup. And the Oilers and the Hurricanes are at the top with a 10% chance each. Next, it's the Vegas Golden Knights and the New Jersey Devils. But after that, it's the Dallas Stars. But I think if you look at the sportsbooks odds, Dallas is closer to the 9th or the 10th shortest shot at around 16-1. And I think that's a good price just based on my projections. I mean, the Stars do give me a little pause for a couple of reasons. I know we saw Jake Ottinger falter last season, even though he's been really good at times, arguably the best goaltender in the league at times, has that high ceiling. So I like that, but I don't, there are things that worry me about this bet for sure. I like the Oilers and the Hurricanes chances a lot more, like Nick talked about, but just from a value perspective, I think there is some value on Dallas here. I think in general, the Stars are a team that maybe is a tad lower than I would expect them to be in a lot of markets, but the Stanley Cup is a decent edge, a 2% difference between what I think their chances are and what the sportsbooks odds represent. So at 16-1, I like Dallas.
All right, I'll take a shot on the Senators at 75-1. I just think that now with the way that the Atlantic Division is shaping up, you can find a 75 on Ottawa, and you look at the team that I think everybody fairly compares them to Buffalo, and Buffalo's at most books is half the odds there. And I think there's an actual path to success here for Ottawa when you look at the season as a full 82 game thing plus 2-month playoff. Like, I don't know if Buffalo's going to have the depth to hold up. Then teams like Florida already banged up. The Lightning with the Andre Vasilevsky news, and their core is kind of aging. And I think there are question marks with the Leafs goaltending and defense. Whereas Ottawa is pretty short up and deep in all three of those spots, right? Goaltending, they should have an okay duo with Anton Forsberg and Jonas Korpisalo at worst, above average. Hopefully, the defense is deep and coming into its own, and guys are entering their primes. And the forwards should, even if they do have some issues in the back end, they should be good enough to outscore those problems. So I just think when you look at the season as a full 82 game thing, a big marathon, I think Ottawa actually has a much better chance to withstand the storm than a normal 75-1 shot would. All right, onto the President's Trophy. Andy, you and I are on the same team, so I'll just let you take it from here.
Yeah, I'm on the Oilers, and I think, it all comes down to Edmonton and the Western Conference just being a little bit weaker overall than the Eastern Conference. I think the average projected point total that I have for the Eastern Conference teams is a little bit higher than 93, closer to 91 in the West. So definitely a disparity there between the strength of the overall strength of the teams, and that's going to help teams like the Oilers and the Golden Knights and the Avalanche and the Dallas Stars to maybe have a better chance of winning the President's Trophy. And that's how it looks when I look at my projections. Those top four Western teams have better average chance of winning the President's Trophy, finishing with the most points than the top four Eastern Conference teams. And the Oilers are right there at the top. I have them and the Hurricanes with an 18% chance roughly of winning the President's Trophy. So that would make the Oilers odds somewhere around plus 450. Same with the Canes, but the Canes odds are actually around 5-1 or 6-1, whereas the Oilers are up at around 9-1, where I bet them at to win the President's Trophy. So, I think the Oilers are a good bet just because of that. All the things Nick talked about before, I think really apply to the regular season. Jay Woodcroft has talked recently, and maybe this is just coach speak, but they're a determined group, right? And, he's talking about how that you can only control what's immediately in front of you, the, practice game, how you prepare, taking it one day at a time, all that stuff you hear all the time. But like for this team, if they approach this season like that, it could be a wash for them. They could just, run away with the league, like we talked about on the Puck Portfolio podcast on Thursday. I think Edmonton is just, really in a good spot to possibly run away with the league. I think, if it is Carolina or Vegas or somebody like that, it's probably a lot lower. But Edmonton, I think, they have the chance to really run away with it, and I like being on that side. So it's I think it's arguably my biggest futures bet, I think, all things considered. So I like the Oilers to win the President's Trophy a lot.
I'll just echo everything you said and pass it along to you, Nick. We've talked a lot about the Oilers already.
Yeah, so obviously not going to argue with any of that when the Oilers are my cup pick. I like the Stars in the President's market, with the greatest reason being my belief in how weak the Central is going to be. I think that's going to give them such a good chance just to clean up points all year long. It's a little frightening. I would assume they're probably going to try to manage Ettinger's starts a little bit more. But I'm willing to put some faith in Scott Wedgwood with what he showed last year. I think that's one thing you want to consider in these President's markets, is that you need to be gaining points on the other teams in the backup races. That makes a big difference in pulling away in these, I think. So for me, the Stars are my favorite. Same with Andy. I like the Canes in this as well as kind of a, odds aside favorite. And then still think the Devils will have a shot to get there as well. But the Stars at plus 1,200 is my favorite price I've seen.
You know what this means, right? It means that Dallas is going to win the President's Trophy, and the Oilers, or sorry, vice versa. We're going to get, we're going to not get what we want one way or the other.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, if one person goes 2-0 on these, that'd be pretty good. So
yeah, that would be pretty good for sure. Yeah, maybe they'll be able to help the other person out a little bit.
All right, from the top to the bottom, wooden spoon market, one we love to talk about on Line Change. We'll talk about it all season long. As the odds kind of get updated with how teams go. We were on one of these teams earlier or last season at a bigger number, the Philadelphia Flyers. But Andy, you and I, we're right back on them here. I think that maybe a little overrated because of the Tortorella effect. And you also have a long shot that you want to talk about.
Yeah, the Flyers at around plus 850. I would definitely recommend shopping around. There's been a bit of variation in terms of their price in this market. I saw as low as 6-1 at some sports books, which isn't necessarily a great book, but a great bet. Sorry, they become a great bet at around at plus 850 though for sure. One of my favorite bets heading into the season, Philadelphia to finish last. I just don't think this team is very good. There's definitely some things kind of of bubbling under the surface too with, what could happen with their goaltending situation that I won't really get into, but I think most people probably know what I'm talking about. And I just don't think the Flyers are very good. My projection model has them finishing last 20% of the time. That's second after the San Jose Sharks, who I think will finish last around 28% of the time, but not a good bet for the Sharks because that's what the odds pretty much represent there. So it's the Sharks. And then in the West, this is a much longer shot and only about a 2% chance that it happens. So not a huge edge, but the Blues at 66-1 to finish in last place overall. I mean, Jordan Binnington's been on the decline for a while. I don't like what they did this offseason. Nothing against Kevin Hayes. I think he's a fine ad, but I don't think they got any better this offseason. And it's, a little bit kind of, I worry about the Central being too weak, like Nick said, but I also think the Blues are one of those weak teams. So things could go really bad for them. And if it does, then I'll hopefully cash in there, or at least have a chance to.
So, yeah, I actually, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I like it. And you're someone who builds projection systems and uses them to help guide you to bets. And I think some of the stuff that won't show up with the Blues in a model also is good. This team has blow up potential, right? Like,
oh yeah,
we saw it already last season start to kind of bubble over. They started to strip down things, changing, captaincy, whatever, but it's still pretty similar group to last year. A lot of the same pieces coming back, and they were a mess. They were.
I think there's a little bit of that with the Flyers too, like not as much, but I do think that there could be a little bit of a blow up here if things go really bad to start, and they really say hey, we want to wipe the slate clean right now and kind of start over while we still can salvage some of this season in terms of the player development and whatnot. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a good kind of both based on projections and also some pencil and paper handicapping. Both these teams, Flyers and Blues. I like the Flyers. I'll probably get it on the Blues with you. Nick and I didn't really get too deep into over-unders, but anything you like here, Andy, that you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, it's going to vary sportsbook to sportsbook. I mean, you'll find a good bet at one that you won't find at another. I've seen some sportsbooks where I like a team like the Senators to go over 91.5 points, which I think is, about 2.5 points too low. I have them projected to finish with 93.6 points since the news of that Andrei Vasilevsky will be out for 8 to 10 weeks was announced. So I look at them as, if you're looking at the Senators as a bet to make the playoffs, I think you can get them around plus 115. I actually think it's for one, it's a much safer bet to go over 91.5 points. And two, I think there's like a lot more value there. It might not look like it when you're comparing plus 115 odds to minus 115 odds, but I think the Senators get 92 plus points around 60% of the time. So they might, they could still miss the playoffs and you might still win that bet, as opposed to betting on them to win the playoff or make the playoffs. And, that benchmark of where they have to get to gets raised a little bit. Now it's a bit harder to make the playoffs, whereas 92 points, that was the cutoff last season. I like the Senators to get there this year. So that's one. Other than that, I think, the Flyers and the Blues stand out as good under bets, depending on what point totals you find. I think the Blues opened around 88.5 and they've come down 86.5 maybe as the kind of consensus price right now, or point total, sorry. So I think that's a pretty decent bet as well. The Flyers around 75.5 points on their total, another decent under bet. But you can check out my full list of all my point projections over at the Canada Sports Betting YouTube channel. I did a debut episode of my podcast earlier this week where I just kind of laid out everything, got them up on the screen behind me. You can pause the video, screenshot, crop my face out of it and look at the projections in your spare time. Maybe help you find a few good futures bets for sure.
Okay, that's basically it for the team-based bets. Now we can get into player futures. Nick, a guy that you've been campaigning for in the Hart Trophy race all offseason. Floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm going with Elias Pettersson as my favorite long shot. He can be had at plus 6,600, and I just think that's a great number. There's a lot of arguments that suggest he should be above a lot of the guys listed in this argument or in this race. I think he can definitely score 100 points again or get right around that benchmark. He's a top defensive player, And I love the way that Vancouver is right on the cusp of having a chance to win or to make it into the playoffs here. If they sneak in, that's going to help his chances a ton. That's a great narrative for him. So at this point, betting this race, we're going to need Connor McDavid not to go completely off. So you always have to factor in that he's probably rightfully priced to take this 50% of the time or more. But Peterson's one long shot that I think the value is there on.
Yeah, he's another one I like, and I'll go more into this at the end of the show. We're going to wrap up. Each one of us is going to give out our favorite bet that's 100 to 1 or longer. I like Ilya Sorokin. You can find him now at 170 to 1 at some sports books as more markets pop up. And Sorokin, to me, is the best goalie in terms of raw talent in the NHL. Whether his team is good enough to kind of get into the playoffs on their own is one thing that I think helps him here, because the Islanders do get in. Sorokin will get even more and more praise. And he's the betting favorite to win the Vezina. And if you're the betting favorite to win the Vezina and he's deserving of that status, which I think he is, it means he should be good enough to at least be in Hart Trophy consideration should he make good on those odds. So I like Sorokin in this market quite a bit at that number. Andy, I know you're sitting this one out, so we'll move on to the Norris. I'll go first here. This is a bet that I've talked about quite a bit on Line Change, so I won't go too deep. Mikhail Sergachev is still 100 to 1. He's going to run the Lightning power play. He has a good chance to be a point per game player as a defenseman, and he's also going to play a ton of minutes. He's the number one defenseman in Tampa. I think that Sergachev at 100 to 1 is a great price. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't mind Sergachev at all. I think in fantasy he's a great buy as well. We'll throw that out there quick. Like Bouchard, we saw the way he scored in the playoffs for the Oilers, 17 points in 12 games, I think is what he finished at. So anything remotely close to that is going to have him in Norris contention. And then I like Rasmus Dahlin, if you can get that plus 1,100 number that's out there some places. Same kind of argument. I think he can be a point per game player this season. He's really going to drive the boat or drive the bus in Buffalo. So if they're good, I love the chances that he ends up in the Norris conversation. So those are my two there.
Yeah, I might piggyback you on the Rasmus Dahlin bet, because I think when you looked at how the Sabres did when he was on the ice versus when he wasn't on the ice last season, I mean, it's clear that he is a premier NHL defenseman, and it's only going to continue to grow in terms of the respect that he gets from the media and stuff around the league, and I like that a lot.
Yep, and he's a Buffalo Sabre, and you're going to hear a lot about the Buffalo Sabres from the media going into the season, and
absolutely.
So, yeah, I don't think that that's a bad shout at all for at the top of the board. I'm also on Bouchard. I will say that. All right, Vezina Trophy now, best goalie in the league. I like my favorite bet is Vitek Vanacek at 175 to 1. We saw Linus Ullmark win this award based on his win-loss record alone, and I think of all the goalies, Vitek Vanacek has the best chance to kind of replicate that. I think he can wrestle the crease from Akira Schmid. I think the Devils won't have a problem starting him, 58 times this season. And if he does win at a really, really impressive clip, it won't matter that he's not an elite goalie posting like an elite save percentage or goal save above expected, etc. I think the same logic can be applied. And Tim Kalinowski brought this up on our Player Awards episode of Line Change for Jack Campbell and a bounce back. That narrative also gets baked into his portfolio for this award, which I like. So Vanacek, Campbell, and if I really wanted to get into it, Marc-Andre Fleury, but Nick has kind of talked me out of that one, even at 200 to 1. So I'll just stick with Vitek and Jack. Nick, your thoughts here on the Vezina?
Yeah, I like Shesterkin. I think the Rangers, their strength this year could arguably be defensive play. It should be improved on that front. There's still some weaker two-way forwards, but I think they'll play better in front of Shesterkin. And I love the fact that I don't believe in Jonathan Quick at all. I think that is favorable to this, because if he struggles in his starts, Shesterkin dominates. It's going to be more clear illustration of how strong Shesterkin really is. And then we also might get 60 plus starts out of him. So I like that. I think that gives him a great opportunity to make his case of being the world's best goaltender, which I think with Vasilevsky out of the picture, I know your guy Sorokin, but for me, I think that's plus 600 is a pretty good price there. And then the one long shot I've been pumping up, I'm still on Thatcher Demko. I think there's a good chance that the Canucks defend a lot better this season. That'll help him. Same thing with the Peterson case. If they sneak in the playoffs and they're, a much more respectable team. I know I've talked about how the Pacific Division should be really competitive, but I think that's a strong case. And we saw the year before when Boudreaux first took over, Demko dragged him to that winning record, and everyone was talking about how a little bit longer of a sample of that kind, and that was the Shesterkin year, I should note as well. A little bit longer of a sample of that kind of play might have really gotten him in that race. All indications are that he's pretty well past his groin injury. Everything sounds good about him entering the year. So I think it's fair to view him as one of the better goalies in the world still, and that he could be in a quietly respectable situation to get into this race.
Andy, any thoughts here on the Vezina before?
I tend to look at the longer shots, and I used to love betting a guy like UC Saros at 20-1 or 40-1 there when he, before he was the notoriety kind of exploded. But I'm having a hard time this year. I think, the league, and with the way that the advanced metrics have really sharpened up everybody on goaltenders these last few years. I think it's getting tougher to find some of these long shots for sure. But I'm still gonna probably consider some, maybe a tiny bet on a guy like Darcy Kemper at 50-1 or something like that. I mean, he was 15th in goals saved above expected last year for on a really bad Capitals team. They're probably going to be really bad again in a lot of ways. But I'd rather look at that than some of the other Capitals bets for sure. And after that, I mean, it's kind of, I kind of like Connor Hellebuck, but I'd probably rather go for it with him in another market that we'll talk about a little bit later.
All right, yeah. Before we get to that, we'll wrap up with the Jack Adams Award, Coach of the Year. Nick and I have talked about Andre Tourigny enough. He's going to start calling the cops in my town. I talked about him on the radio today. I talked about him with NHL.com. He's going to be a little concerned. So we still like Andre Tourigny. He's at 66-1. That is a great bet. It's still out there. Join the fun there. But Nick, you have another guy you want to talk about.
Yeah, and we've talked about him a little as well. I think DJ Smith, I believe in the Senators. We talked about it on this show as well. They're right around plus 110, plus 115 to make the playoffs. I actually view it as pretty much purely 50-50. They make the playoffs, and if they do, I don't think the path is that complicated for him to steal this award. So plus 2,500 for me is a good number to put some faith in the Sens and Smith getting in the race.
I do want to mention one guy. I talked about this on the Puck Portfolio last night, and that's John Cooper. I think his path is now wide open with the Vasilevsky stuff and the fact that he's never won the award. So
you convinced me like almost immediately, and as soon as I started thinking about it, I found him at 24-1, which nice, right? But you could also bet Cooper to be the first coach fired. I think there's like a big range of outcomes. And the same goes for DJ Smith. He's heading into his 5th year as Senators head coach. This is a guy that like could win the Jack Adams at the end of the year or be fired in the first month of the season because they've got a new ownership group. That's not going to mess around if a team with like a lot of hype and a lot of excitement around it is, stumbles out of the gate and it's bad. Which they've kind of shown a penchant. I know it's a different team, but they've shown a penchant as an organization to kind of have some bad Octobers. So I like DJ Smith as a potential candidate too, but I just think it's going to be interesting because there's a big range of possibilities here for both the Lightning and the Senators. So it could be something really really wild that happens for sure.
Yeah, and to piggyback that point, there was a point last season I had Lindy Ruff first coach fired tickets for the same arguments.
You were the only one.
Yeah, I truly thought, I think they were one game away from those maybe cashing, and then it got to a point where I was adding President's futures a week later when the numbers were so favorable. So
the swings.
That's a really fair point.
It is, and it's funny. Like you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like putting Tourigny aside, because I don't think he's really in the conversation to be fired with the way that team is set up and they signed him to an extension. But it's almost a telltale sign if a guy's a good Jack Adams candidate, if he's also kind of in the market to be the first, if he's going to be a good bet for first coach to leave his post as well. Cooper, as far as Cooper goes, I mean, I think he's around 66-1 or something like that to be the first coach fired. So you can you can probably justify making a little bit of a bigger bet on the Jack Adams Award. Given the narrative will be pretty strong if he can get the Lightning through this stretch without Vasilevsky and into a playoff spot and whatnot. But I think there's it's probably worth considering at least a tiny bet on that on the alternative. Yeah, and if it also, this just kind of popped into my head. A lot of times we see the first coach, it's technically quote unquote like first coach to leave his post, right? So Cooper's a guy I could see that if, let's say, the Lightning just come out real flat, like 6-10-1, being like, you know what, Paul Maurice style, I'm kind of just cooked. Like, let me just step away.
Yeah.
I've been there forever. Like, the team's probably sick of me or what, all that kind of stuff. I could kind of see
Maybe.
it.
Yeah.
He'd be like the leading candidate for me of any coach in the league right now to do that.
Okay, speaking of which, though, I bet Paul Maurice to win the Jack Adams that year that he actually walked away from. He's just like, Andy bet me to win the Jack Adams. I'm out of here.
Yeah, get me out of here. All right, so that's the Jack Adams, DJ Smith, our man Andre Tourigny, and John Cooper in the double of first coach fired / Jack Adams. All right, this is going to be the star of the show here. The reason all you guys came to listen to us. We're each going to give out our favorite bet that's triple digit long shot, 100-1 or longer. Nick, you can go first.
All right, so don't have a ton of conviction here, but I think they're fun flyers. I like Marner to win the Hart. You can get it past 100-1, and Crosby to win the Hart. You can get, I think it's 120-1 is out there. So case is simple for both. Like, I think Matthews is maybe a touch overvalued in this. We've seen Marner gets used on the PK, gets used everywhere. He's going to put up a comparable point total, so should still be pretty strong effort from him. I think that number's a touch too long. And then Crosby, excellent two-way play, great narrative. Maybe the Pens bounce back. He scores a little more. So those are my two favorite ones. And then we kind of touched on the Stamkos 100-1, and I actually kind of looked into that a little more. And now I'm a little shakier on that. So I'll note that. And then quickly I'll slide into, because we didn't get in this and it got in there yesterday, I still think the more I look at this, Hischier plus 500 to win the South is a great number. It's not like he's going to be in the mix so often. So I'll slide that in as my way to close the episode.
Okay. So a 5-1 bet in the 100-1 or longer section, along with 100-1 flyers. I love it.
I want to win my bet.
Yeah, I love it. For me, my favorite 100-1 or longer is Ilya Sorokin to win the Hart. I made my case earlier in the episode, but I think that if this guy is truly deserving to be the Vezina favorite, which he is, that means he's going to be a better goalie more often than not than Igor Shesterkin, Saros, Connor Hellebuck. You go down the list. That means he's got a decent chance to have a truly elite, maybe borderline historic season. And in this market where it's going to be Connor McDavid versus the field, and you need to get the field correct, I'd rather have a goalie where it's a little harder to compare a statistical portfolio for McDavid. Let's say he puts up 130 points again, and Sorokin has a terrific season. It's a little bit harder to say, yeah, McDavid put up 130 points, but Mitch Marner, for example, put up 110. How can we give it to Marner over McDavid? Whereas for a goalie, it's apples and oranges, chalk and cheese. So comparing an elite historic season from Sorokin to one from McDavid, you can sort of see a little bit of wiggle room there. So I'm going to go with Sorokin, 171 out there. I think it's a great bet. Andy, similar logic for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not somebody that's typically slumming it in the triple digits like you, but I did my best to find something here that I at least kind of like. And like Nick said, I mean, you'd probably want to check on us if we said we had conviction in these bets, right? So, yeah, I mean, Connor Hellebuck, talked a little bit about him. He has the potential to be a top goaltender in the NHL, both on the surface, in traditional metrics like save percentage and whatnot, and when it comes to the advanced metrics like expected goals and things like that. I think Hellebuck can grade out really well in all those categories. I do worry about Winnipeg sort of just flying under the radar with a lot of people, but at the same time, if Hellebuck can drag this team into the playoffs, especially if their offense kind of suffers a little bit with the loss of PLD and Blake Wheeler, I actually think the Jets made out really well in the offseason, all things considered, and I like their team overall. I think they're about a 90-point team, but yeah, I mean, they're going to be on the cusp of making the playoffs, and I mean, rather than take him at plus 650 or whatever he is to win the Vezina, I think you can justify maybe some pizza money on Hellebuck to win the Vezina, or to win the Hart, at 100-1.
I love it. 300-1s or better, 4 actually, because Nick gave out 2. Definitely worth considering. Let us know about your favorite.
And can I just say, I also like McDavid at even money to win the Hart Trophy. Since Nick got to throw in, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just picking.
Yeah, I mean, Like if we're gonna win the Hart Trophy,
And we'll clip that at the end of the year.
Might as well try to do it with someone who's this deep. But yeah, let us know what your favorite triple-digit long shot is for the NHL season, either in the comments or on Twitter or whatever. You know where to find us. Be sure to check out the Puck Portfolio with Andy McNeil every day 12:30 Eastern time on YouTube. Correct?
Yes.
Monday through Friday throughout the hockey season. Also, be sure to check out his work at Canada Sports Betting. Be sure to check out Nick. He'll be at Action Network all season long, and with me on Line Change all season long. We'll also mix in Tim Kalinowski for a bulk of the season as well. We're hoping to go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the season. We'll see about that, but you will definitely hear from us again on Tuesday morning before opening night, maybe even Monday night if we can get it out early enough. So for Nick Martin, for Andy McNeil, for our producer Noah, I'm Michael Leboff. Thank you so much for joining us for all 4 of these season preview episodes. We hope we set you up with a decent futures betting portfolio and a good idea of how to attack this NHL season. And hopefully by middle of June, all of us who listen to this podcast or do the podcast are celebrating some big wins thanks to our man in the desert, Andre Tourigny.